No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken Live, episode number 8. And Donald Trump has returned to the spotlight just 2 days after an assassination attempt destroyed part of his ear. But it's his pick for Vice President, JD Vance, who has upset all of the usual suspect British leftists for suggesting, only somewhat jokingly, that the UK is on course to become the world's first truly Islamist nuclear superpower. So does he have a point? And why is it considered taboo to discuss this sort of demographic change? Well, you know, I don't have that fare on Outspoken, so I'll tackle it head on very shortly in the digest. And your view in our question of the day, which you can vote for on my X profile today: was Trump's VP pick JD Vance right to suggest the UK might become the world's first truly Islamist nuclear superpower? Also coming up on the show, as super wet Tom Tugendhat prepares to launch his leadership bid, why is the Conservative Party throwing out true small c Conservatives? Connor Tomlinson talks about his suspension from the Tories as he joins Republican overseas UK spokeswoman Jennifer Ewing on today's Superstar panel. We'll also discuss why Harry and Meghan were heckled to go back to Britain after this dud ESPYs appearance.
Pass this microphone down to her. Go.
And then I cannot wait for this, in depth with one of the smartest brains in Britain, the former Reform UK Deputy Leader Ben Habib, who outlines how he thinks the UK can be saved. Plus, Ben Habib will be sticking around to answer your questions in our uncancelled after show, where we come off big tech to truly unleash. So remember to sign up right now at www.outspoken.live. Click the sign up button and you will get 30 minutes extra content completely uncensored every single day. Remember too to hit subscribe right now if you're watching on YouTube and Rumble, because we are here every single weekday. Let's go. So Donald Trump's vice presidential pick, JD Vance, has upset every major leftist in Britain today for this joke about the likelihood of the Islamist state of Britain becoming a reality under slippery Starmer.
By the way, I have to beat up on the UK just one additional thing. I was talking with a friend recently, and we were talking about, you know, one of the big dangers in the world, of course, is nuclear proliferation, though, of course, the Biden administration doesn't care about it. And I was talking about, you know, what is the first truly Islamist country that will get a nuclear weapon? And we were like, maybe it's Iran, you know, maybe Pakistan already kind of counts. And then we sort of finally decided maybe it's actually the UK, since Labour just took over. But to my Tory friends, I have to say, you guys have got to get a handle on this. But not.
It's a sort of a joke, but one anchored in truth. And you can imagine how the British commentary reacted. The Daily Mirror's associate editor Kevin Maguire raged, dangerous, racist and stupid, just like his boss. Lovey actor Robert Lindsay wrote, how dare Vance, standing in a country so divided, confused and angry, comment on our country. Sort out your own backyard, pal. Good Morning Britain's resident race-baiting socialist Adil Ray stormed Vance, Trump's likely VP, claiming UK now an Islamist country since Labour took over. Islamist is used to describe Islamic fundamentalists, but also made to sound like Muslims generally. This language is highly dangerous, divisive, and makes no one safe. Left wing. Former BBC Trump hater-in-chief John Sopel added, this is alarming. For a clever man, this is a very stupid remark. British diplomacy has its work cut out with the Trump-Vance ticket. And even the Mail on Sunday's more moderate columnist Dan Hodges claimed, if JD Vance wants to use racist insults against us, that's his choice. But if senior Tories like Liz Truss and Boris Johnson want to rock up to the Republican convention and ingratiate themselves with him and his boss, the British people will remember. And so that's what happens, right? When you attempt to have any conversation about disturbing and out of control demographic change in the UK. The corrupt MSM and political elite immediately lambast you as racist and dangerous and backward in an attempt to avoid the debate altogether. I would argue that we must be having this conversation. So rather than being so outraged about that JD Vance joke anchored in truth, the political establishment should actually take a step back and realise the British people are absolutely terrified about the Islamist future that he predicts. And it's this graph that explains exactly why, by the way. So these are just cold, hard statistics. I've checked them all. They're all accurate. In 1961, the British Muslim population was 50,000. That was 0.11% of the population. In 2021, the British Muslim population was 3.9 million, 6.5% of the population. That's a compound annual growth rate of 7.53%. And if that rate continues by 2051, the UK's Muslim population will be 34 million. Now, I guess one of the big questions is that a problem? Well, for me, as a gay man, yes. Given that polls have regularly shown that 50% of British Muslims have zero tolerance towards homosexuality. Women, too, should have a massive concern about the creep of Sharia law into our society. But our new Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, has been much more focused on branding Donald Trump a, quote, neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath. Socialist Labour's priorities in opposition were all wrong, and it looks like they are going to remain all wrong in government. But for once, and it's not often I say this, the British Bashing Corporation actually called out their hypocrisy. Today, when the new Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner tried to talk about the need for civility in politics, it was BBC Breakfast who reminded her that she was the one who branded every single Conservative in the country as Tory scum.
One of the things I'm concerned about is many times when I go into colleges and to schools and do talks, the one thing that the students always ask me about is how do I cope with the level of abuse that I receive? I find that sad that that is their question, because it worries me that people won't want to stand for office. And for a thriving democracy, we need people to stand for office, and we need people to uphold our democracy by making sure that people aren't intimidated, we don't see that violence, and that people can exercise their right to vote.
But there might be young people who heard you using the word scum about Tory politicians yourself and having to apologise for that only a couple of years ago, who were also put off going into politics. I mean, how do you now, as Deputy Prime Minister, reflect on your own use of language and your own responsibility in this?
Well, you'll have seen at the time about how I dealt with that, and I apologise, but there was also inflammatory language across the board, including racist, homophobic and misogynistic comments made by the then Prime Minister, and I think it was wrong. I've said I was wrong, and I've said that the Prime Minister was wrong, and I think we all...
So slowly but surely, the left are being exposed for their hypocritical whataboutery and for being the complete opposite of the be kind warriors they proclaim to be. It's lovely to see. But now, let's bring in today's superstar panel. And I'm delighted to have with me the growing intellectual giant in the independent media conservative space, Connor Tomlinson, host of the excellent Tomlinson Talks on Lotus Eaters, and my friend Jennifer Ewing, the spokesperson for Republicans Abroad UK. And look, so much to talk about, but Connor, what's your take on this JD Vance joke and this hysterical reaction from the left in the UK, describing him as dangerous and racist?
Well, I was delighted to be one of the 5 Brits actually in the room at this dinner, Dan, and it went down with laughter and applause, because those in the room, either the Englishmen who are concerned about the demographic realities that you've highlighted, the rapid sectarian violence, the threat of such that's been posed to Speaker Lindsay Hoyle, or even our old nemesis at lotuseaters.com, Jess Phillips, being heckled and shouted down during her acceptance speech at the election. They're concerned. But also, and this isn't untoward to observe, there are quite a few Jews involved with the NatCon movement. I mean, Yoram Hazony himself is an Israeli-American. And so you might understand why those Jewish members of the the National Conservatives in conference, might be a bit concerned if Islam becomes the majority in the UK, because already when it is a minority, it's putting on pro-Palestinian protests and projecting from the river to the sea onto the Elizabeth Tower every weekend and Wednesday in Westminster. They might have a little bit of a problem with that. And the idea that JD Vance is a racist, I mean, look, they're always going to accuse you of racism. It's pure projection. It's not about hypocrisy, it's about hierarchy. Bear in mind, his wife is an Indian immigrant, or at least the daughter of immigrants, and has intermarried into the culture. And he said himself that even though America is not a free-floating nation of ideas, it is a people, it is a shared heritage, it is a religion, it is an established nation. He said he'd quite like his wife to be buried right alongside him in a plot that his family has picked out for in Kentucky. So he considers her a part of the American tribe too. So it's not about skin color, it's about deeply felt senses of belonging, and that means assimilation into the culture that keeps us all safe.
Jennifer, you're a big fan of JD Vance. He was your pick.
Absolutely. I read his book, Hillbilly Elegy, back in 2016 before Trump was even elected. And after the surprise election of Donald Trump in 2016, a lot of people who were not paying attention to what was going on in the United States of America were surprised. Like, how did this former reality television star, real estate mogul, get this far? And people looked to Hillbilly Elegy, JD Vance's book, and said, look, there's an entire portion of America that has been neglected, that has been overlooked, whether that's because their manufacturing jobs were sent overseas, whether that's because people no longer appreciated physical labor. We had Hillary Clinton calling half of the population deplorables. And, it's just terrible the way a lot of these people have been treated and a lot of the ways in which they've been left behind. JD Vance himself is the American dream. I mean, as if you have read Hillbilly Elegy or even just, things that have gone on in the press about him in the last couple of days, he comes from, a very poor background full of addiction and violence. And his grandmother ended up raising him, kept him on the straight and narrow. He signed up for the Marines when we went to Iraq, served there, then went on to Yale Law School and became a senator in Ohio. And, as of last night, the rest is history. And one of the great things that's being said about him is that he has the courage to go to war for America, but also the wisdom to know when to avoid certain wars. So great choice. And I think he's going to do very well for the ticket.
Indeed, and he's on a collision course with David Lammy because, of course, he doesn't care about the result of the war in Ukraine. I think he's an inspired choice. I think it's a brave choice of Trump because what he's saying is that the future of MAGA is not going to be me. This is a movement that should continue after my second term. And here is this inspiring 39-year-old with all of the right credentials and celebrity charisma in order to become president after me. I'm really excited about it. And by the way, I think the fact that, the likes of John Sopel and Kevin Maguire and Adil Ray dislike him actually means that I love him already. But look, breaking right now, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has apologized after releasing a video clip that shows a private conversation that he had between himself and Trump after the shooting. Let's listen to this. We'll come to the clip shortly. But this has caused quite a bit of outrage, Jennifer, because there shouldn't have necessarily been a situation where RFK... I think we can watch it now and then we'll react off the bat.
And I think it'll be so good for you and so big for you. And we're going to win. We're going to win. We're way ahead of the guy. And, he's interesting. It was very nice, actually. He called me. And he said... how did you choose to move to the right? Because, so I guess that's, people say, if I was looking straight on, right? He said, I said, I was just showing a chart. I didn't have to tell him the chart was on all the people pouring into our country, right? But now I would just turn my head to show the chart. And something wrapped me. It felt like a giant, like the world's largest mosquito. And it was a bullet going right. What did they call that? An AR-15 or something? That was a big gun. Those are pretty tough guns, right?
Now, look, Jennifer, I think this is really inappropriate. I'm delighted that RFK Jr. has apologized for the leak. But can I just say, on a couple of levels, firstly, here's Trump speaking candidly about his near-death experience, something he hasn't done in public yet, believing it's a private call. Secondly, there's lots of hope that RFK Jr. might be elected into Trump's cabinet to, for example, run a big investigation into the vaccines and the vaccine damage, something that could have been a requirement for an RFK Jr. endorsement of Trump. But the trust is going to be smashed after the leak of that sort of video, isn't it? I think it's a really silly move for RFK Jr. to have done this.
Well, he says that there was filming going on in his house, right? And he just happened to be on the phone during that time. I mean, the cynic in me says this was somewhat done on purpose. I don't know. I think Trump likes a lot of RFK Jr.'s policies. He was never going to be able to choose him as a vice president because, he is still very liberal. However, they cross over on a lot of issues, challenging our institutions that have failed us terribly since lockdown, obviously looking into the death of his uncle and his father. And then a big issue, and if you talk to anybody who's, say, in the 20-year-old range or younger, their big issues are no more forever wars, looking into this sort of food and drug vicious cycle that America's into, where we're being fed poison and then we're being put on drugs to cure ourselves from whatever happened. So I don't know how terrible this is, as long as Trump knew about it. Let's put it that way.
But I don't think he did, Connor. That's the issue. He was having a really candid conversation. And my assumption, Connor, is the fact that RFK has gone out and given this apology is because he's had Trump's team saying, what the hell have you just done?
Quite, and I don't know if it's a two-party or single-party consent state where it was filmed and released, and I'm sure Trump's team will be looking into that. I think it would be a mistake to do any kind of lawfare against RFK, but obviously he wants to cover his backside, so to speak. On the idea that RFK would have been appointed VP and on JD Vance being VP, look, if Trump would have appointed RFK VP, I think it would have been unwise, mainly because, as has already been said, RFK was running to the left, despite challenging the FDA and food and drug regulation cabal. He is pro-reparations. He's pro-abortion up till birth until he backed off because he realized he was polling badly on that. He's pro-ending the Second Amendment, and he's demented on the climate change policy to the point of where he wants to run roughshod over the First Amendment for climate change denial. Bear in mind, they accused Trump of that, but he was the #1 president to bring down emissions during his term and actually repatriate gas manufacturing. So look, from my sources, I am surprised he chose Vance, because I know for a fact it was down to Vance and Rubio right at the week of NatCon. This is why Rubio was booked for the second night and why Vance was booked for the third night. Rubio actually pulled out last minute on the morning of the Tuesday to go back to Florida, and people thought this was him getting the call. And I had word from within Rubio's team that they were gearing up for the VP's office. Both were Catholics. The reason he was probably going to pick Rubio was because Rubio is on the Senate Intelligence and Defense Committee, and so he can play nice for the feds who frustrated Trump's first term. And so I think this is quite a last-minute change, and this is just my speculation now. I wonder if Vance has been appointed as essentially assassination insurance after Saturday, because people think that Rubio might be squishier than Vance, and so Trump is thinking, who's going to haunt the nightmares of my enemies? Who are they going to worry about taking me out and installing instead? And I think it's Vance. And so I'm curious as to why Rubio was stepped over, because that's what I was being told, but I think we'll be able to judge Vance's record. I think his speech given at NatCon, though, gives a lot of people in that base that are very America first and socially conservative a bit more hope.
Jennifer, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, and I certainly was not implying that RFK was ever a serious contender for VP. I just think, they overlap on a few issues. But with regards to JD Vance, he'd been chosen a while ago. He's been completely loyal to the president. And also, it's a real choice. It's a confident choice by Trump. He is saying, I am doubling down on the America First issues that I know that are important, to my, supporters. And if he had chosen a Rubio, that would have just steered the Republican Party right back towards the uniparty, towards some forever wars, towards a lot of things that the new generation of Republicans do not want to see. We are a far more populist nation than we were in the last few elections, and JD Vance speaks to that.
Totally.
100%.
Totally. And look,
Disappointment.
I am so much more confident with Vance as VP than I am with Rubio as VP.
Yeah.
I really, really am. Meanwhile, it's a tale of two campaigns, and things just get worse for doddery, dementia-plagued, clearly unwell controlled President Biden, who gave a new interview to NBC News where, quite rightly, he was challenged over his own rhetoric, given that he had just a few days before the attempted assassination attempt spoken about putting a bullseye on Trump. I'm going to play you quite a bit of this because, again, it's really disturbing to see just how much Biden struggles to get through it. He is barely incoherent at in points, but he's also incredibly hypocritical. So watch this.
Of those. You called your opponent an existential threat on a call a week ago. You said it's time to put Trump in the bullseye. There's some dispute about the context, but I think you appreciate that.
I didn't say
words
crosshairs. I was talking about focus on. Look, the truth of the matter was, what I guess I was talking about at the time was there was very little focus on Trump's agenda.
Yeah, the term is bullseye.
It was a mistake to use the word. I didn't say crosshairs. I meant bullseye. I meant focus on him. Focus on what he's doing. Focus on his policies. Focus on the number of lies he told in the debate. Focus. I mean, there's a whole range of things that, look, I'm not the guy that said, I want to be a dictator on day one. I'm not the guy that refused to accept the outcome of the election. I'm not the guy who said that won't accept the outcome of this election automatically. You can't only love your country when you win. And so the focus was on what he's saying, and I mean the idea.
But have you taken a step back and done a little soul searching on things that you may have said that could incite people who are not balanced?
Well, I don't think, look, how do you talk about the threat to democracy, which is real, when a president says things like he says? Do you just not say anything because it may incite somebody? Look, I have not engaged in that rhetoric. Now, my opponent is engaged in that rhetoric. He talks about there'll be a bloodbath if he loses, talking about how he's going to forgive all the, actually, I guess, suspend the sentences of all those who were arrested and sentenced to go to jail because of what happened in the Capitol. I'm not out there making fun of, like, remember the picture of Donald Trump when Nancy Pelosi's husband was hit with a hammer, joking about it?
This doesn't sound like you're turning down the heat, though. You've talked about
No. Look, what I'm turning down, we have to stop the whole notion that there are certain things that are contrary to our democracy.
Connor, it's extraordinary. I mean, if you just put to one side his troubled delivery and the fact that he's really struggling to even recall words, his argument is that, well, yeah, actually, Trump's worse than me. No, you were the one who said 8 days before he was nearly shot dead by a apparent madman, likely connected to Antifa, that there should be a bullseye on President Trump. It doesn't actually matter what happened with January 6th. And we know, by the way, that the bloodbath comment was not at all talking about violence. It was talking about an economic bloodbath if the Democratic regime continued.
Yeah, bear in mind, this is the exact same Joe Biden, I don't know if he can actually remember doing it, who stood up about a year or so ago with a blood red background saying that half of the country, the MAGA Republicans, are a threat to democracy. They keep toting out this term as well, existential threat to democracy now. I mean, that prefix means that this is a threat to our way of life, that it is zero sum, that if Trump wins, this will be, as MSNBC host and all-round idiot Joy Reid said, the second coming of Adolf Hitler himself. And so if you keep saying that this man is Hitler, Brian Stelter, famous CNN host who was appalling until he got the sack, contributed an essay to a magazine that had Trump's face photoshopped as Hitler on the front of it only a week or so ago. If you keep saying this man is Adolf Hitler, then it is reasonable to take a crack at him, because remember, the entire mythology of the post-World War order is to stop a second Adolf Hitler coming to power. I mean, we have a Churchill statue for a reason. It's because Britain prides itself, and America prides itself, on getting involved in the Second World War and attempting to take that power down. So they knew what they were doing when they were doing this. And we know what they're doing, because every time that the right criticizes some transgender activist, they say this is stochastic terrorism, that this is going to incite a shooting of a gay nightclub, even though, by the way, there are more per capita transgender shooters than there are white male shooters, because of course there is, because they've been whipping them into a frenzy about a trans genocide as well. So all of this is completely bunk, and all they want to do is continue to have a carve out to demonize their enemies while taking no culpability for the fact that the president was nearly shot live on television.
And Jennifer, it's not just political figures who are proving themselves to be completely hypocritical. I want to show you this tweet from the Star Wars actor Mark Hamill, who commented after Trump appeared with the bandage over his ear, because, by the way, he's had part of his ear blown off, permanently gone. And he wrote, first appearance of ludicrously oversized ear bandage, apparently not needed prior to tonight, with an ear and a laughing face emoji, Jennifer, because, you know, being a millimetre from near certain death is just hilarious for the be kind woke left. What do you make of it?
Well, I mean, look, I'm a free speech absolutist, so I think people have the right to say whatever they want. However, Connor really hits on a good point where he said, if you only consume mainstream media, and the media and the Biden administration, and indeed, you know, former actors or current actors like Mark Hamill and the rest of Hollywood are constantly telling the American people that Trump is a fascist and a dictator and Hitler-esque, and if he gets elected in 2024, our country is over. There are going to be, crazy people out there that are thinking, yes, it's up to me to, this is 1935 and I have the chance to stop the next Hitler. So look, the only person responsible for the shooting is the shooter. But a lot of this rhetoric has definitely contributed to it. And I do not see that clip you just played of Joe Biden as dialing it down in any way. What I did see is, thankfully, since 2 Thursdays ago, some of the mainstream media is starting to do some actual journalism rather than activism. And I also see Joe Biden, who I have said for the last year, there is no way he will be the candidate come November.
Yeah, the problem is it's getting too late. He ain't moving. Look, I love seeing, by the way, the woke celebrity left start to eat themselves too. And this has happened brilliantly with the comedian Jack Black, who is one half of the band Tenacious D, alongside a bloke called Kyle Glass. And they were on stage in Australia Sunday night. And it was Kyle Glass's birthday. So Jack Black says to him, it's not a political discussion at all, what's your one wish for your birthday? And this is what happened.
Make a wish, Canada. Don't miss Trump next time. Thank you.
So that's Kyle Glass saying his one wish on his birthday was for the shooter not to miss Trump next time. So just imagine, by the way, just imagine for a single second, this was a right-wing commentator or news broadcaster or politician. It would be leading every news bulletin in the world. This person would be driven out of polite society. But of course, because it's a left-wing figure and deep down, they all seem to think it's totally acceptable to want Trump dead, there wasn't much reaction. However, when the clip started to go viral on X, and thank God for X and the free speech that Elon Musk has granted us, all of a sudden, Jack Black realizes, there's a bit of a problem here. I didn't say anything on stage. The audience laughed along, but I want to save my Hollywood career. So in the last hour, Jack Black has now released a statement throwing his bandmate Kyle Glass completely under the bus and saying that Tenacious D are going to halt all their future shows. He said, I was blindsided by what was said at the show on Sunday. I would never condone hate speech or encourage political violence in any form. After much reflection, I no longer feel it is appropriate to continue the Tenacious D tour. Connor Tomlinson, this is the worst of the hypocritical celebrity movement, isn't it?
Quite. I mean, it's really disappointing for me to have pretty much every election people I generally like or their work that I admire just routinely fall flat and betray themselves not to be heroic or respectable people. I mean, bear in mind, Mark Hamill tried to pressure his, reportedly, according to this woman, his daughter-in-law, or at least I don't think they're married, into having an abortion. So really stand-up guy there, and has recently come out and turned into the disappointing version of Luke Skywalker, a sort of doddering old man who just wants to be put down politically, at least, that we saw in The Last Jedi and hated. Then we had Billie Eilish dancing in a graveyard to endorse Biden in 2020, and her music hasn't been the same since. And now we've got Jack Black, who was a staple of my childhood, come out about a week or so before the debate in an American flag set of dungarees, insisting that Joe Biden's brain wasn't leaking out of his ears. And now you've got his bandmates. And I suppose in this sort of mask-off moment, it shows the sort of company you keep, because the first instinct Trump had was to jump up, punch his fist in the air and say fight. The instinct he had when talking to RFK was be exactly as candid as he is when he goes off teleprompter at his speeches. He's a consistent man. So you can only presume that these are the kinds of conversations that are had off stage at Tenacious D. And I would like to disagree just slightly with Jennifer here, if I may. I do think the entire media and political establishment are actually culpable for this as well as the shooter, because they've been encouraging this for years. Like they've been saying, take him out. I mean, you had the head of the Lincoln Project saying that someone should put a bullet in him, and they aren't strong enough to do it themselves. They know it would look too bad. They want to outsource this to the exact kind of crazy people that they know are in their base. And the reason I say that is because in our polite private conversations, we don't say that sort of thing. We're not delusional. We're not freakish. We just want a peaceful and civilized society, and frankly, to stop them from preying on our kids and our way of life. So that is the mask-off moment. The fact that there is no reconciling with these people, because they would sooner see Trump dead than win an election.
Jennifer, final word to you.
Look, I agree. The media is a disgrace. Most of them, not all of them, obviously, Dan Wootton. But look, if we
I'm
reverse...
outside the mainstream now. Trust me.
That's what I said, except, yeah, outside. And you know what? But if we were to reverse that, and every lunatic that, has said something and is a Trump supporter, we're in trouble on that side. But thank you so much for having me. I'm going to have to jump.
Yes, Jennifer, thank you so much. Brilliant to have you. Jennifer Ewing, spokesperson for Republicans Abroad UK. But Connor Tomlinson, I want you to stay with me, because as the superwet Tom Tugendhat prepares to launch his leadership bid for the Conservative Party, for some reason, the Tories seem to be throwing out true small c Conservatives, like you, which you revealed in a tweet recently, posting the letter as well that you received from CCHQ. So you're now out of the party. You say you're not going to cooperate with them throughout this process. And in fact, you're going to join another political party. Personally, I think it's absolutely insane that they're throwing people like you and Calvin Robinson and Carl Benjamin out of the party. It is madness. But what do you make of the fact that they simply don't seem to be learning any lessons from this Reform UK surge at the most recent election by looking to candidates like Tom Tugendhat, like Victoria Atkins, who, let me tell you, are not going to do a thing to save the Conservatives?
So I will stipulate that I haven't decided if I'm joining another party yet, just because, as you're about to get into with Ben, no doubt, some of the moves at Reform UK in their reshuffle concern me, and so they haven't quite won my £25 a year membership. However, yes, we were sitting at NatCon, we were about 2 hours out from Suella's speech, and both myself and my colleague at Lotus Eats, Carl Benjamin, got emails that we had been kicked out of the Conservative Party. We were not given a list of reasons yet, and I only assume it's my greatest hits, so I'm probably going to stand by every single one of them. The reason that I just shared the email is because I know the outcome of the investigation, and I shared this off just before, actually. Richard Holden had resigned as party chairman. This seems to have been the sort of deathbed wish for his career. I knew the outcome of this investigation. I know what it's going to be, because the Conservative Party is remaining impenetrable and inflexible to, pardon the pun, reform. They do not want to course correct. They are listening to losers like Tobias Ellwood and Andy Street and Robert Buckland of the One Nation Caucus, who go out there and say, we must continue to win elections from the centre. And it's like, sorry, you lurch too far to the right. 1.2 million immigrants every year is too far to the right. Net zero, too far to the right. continuing the transgender agenda with tabling conversion therapy bans, or banning people from silently praying in their head on the street corners near abortion facilities is too far to the right, is it? You're all ludicrous, and you deserve that thundering loss. It's just a shame that great conservatives like Andrea Jenkins and Miriam Cates suffered because of the radioactive brand and too many wets stayed in. Now, on the leadership competition, I think Tom Tugendhat is going to launch his candidacy because he's a favourite of the sort of military-industrial complex warmongering cohort. But I think what's going to happen is he's going to fold in behind Kemi Badenoch. And I'm telling you now, everyone that's putting up Kemi Badenoch as a right-wing candidate, don't fall for it. She refused to commit to the European Research Group's bonfire of Brexit legislation. Gove has been in her corner for quite some time. Even cabinet ministers have mentioned this to me, that they do not trust her, direct quote. And I think what's going to happen is she's going to look like the sensible compromise that's going to critique Rishi Sunak, as we saw those leaks from the Times, from the shadow cabinet, but not go as far as the brave and actually very pleasant Suella Braverman. And so what I think is going to happen is Suella, she's probably not going to defect to Reform because she has to represent the Conservative Party because that's what she was elected to do. But I wouldn't be shocked if they give her the Lee Anderson treatment and send her and actual Conservatives like myself elsewhere.
I couldn't agree more with that analysis. Kemi Badenoch is the definition of controlled opposition. She is not to be trusted. Yes, there's a Stop Suella movement going on, but actually the real Conservatives within the Conservative Party are desperate to stop Kemi because they know she's a Michael Gove stooge, she's a CCHQ stooge, and actually she's not going to bring the sort of fundamental change that is needed for that party. The only person who probably would, Suella Braverman, as you say, is just never going to get through the MP rounds. And I think it is quite possible that there is a scenario where she ends up in Reform UK, but only time will tell. And look, Connor, I've got to get a final word from you on this extraordinary clip that has gone viral of Harry and Meghan being heckled on their way out of the ESPY Awards. So this is when he won the Pat Tillman Award against the wishes of Pat Tillman's own mother, the American war hero who famously defected from the NFL in order to go and fight for the US in Afghanistan and was killed in a friendly fire incident in 2004 it was. But as you can see, when they are leaving the venue, there's quite a reaction from the crowd, including someone who yells out, "Go back to Britain." Listen to this.
Pass this microphone down to her. Go.
What do you reckon? Is it over for Harry in America now that he's been heckled at these sorts of events, Connor?
I think the media love affair with them is done by the fact that they're going around all of the major woke institutions cap in hand looking for work. And look, the general sentiment while I was at NatCon interacting with the members of our former colony was that when these guys came up in conversation, it's because they brought them up and they made a joke of them. Our institutions have been dragged through the mud by our government, by our media, by our civil service for years. And so we don't need the royal family, which exoterically is a bastion of British tradition, also dirtied by the association with Harry and Meghan either. And so I think that love affair with the media that has gone sour might go sour within the former House of Windsor too. But I don't wish to wish too much bad on their relationship. I just wish they would shut up and slink off into obscurity.
Indeed. Connor Tomlinson, so great to have you making your debut appearance on Outspoken. And of course, your show, Tomlinson Talks, can be found on the brilliant Lotus Eaters. Now, stand by because we're going in depth with the former Reform UK Deputy Leader Ben Habib in literally 1 minute. First, though, what's so important about being independent is that I'm only ever going to tell you about products that I use and truly believe in and think can improve your life. So that's why I'm so excited to tell you about Verso. As you may know, I've entered my 40s and the importance of staying healthy as I age has become really critical to me. So after a very stressful year, I've decided to focus on prioritizing my health so I can stay fit and sharp while still being busy and engaged. So I'm exercising, I'm doing the 16-8 fast, but that only gets you so far, believe me. Scientists like David Sinclair have actually proven we can now reverse aging with interventions that go beyond healthy habits. So for me, I wanted a product that I knew would enhance everything I was already doing that is backed up with solid evidence. So that's why I've started using Salbean by Verso. It has scientifically proven ingredients that fight the effects of aging, by increasing NAD plus levels. Now, I hadn't heard of it, but it's the stuff that powers every cell in your body. And I've been taking the product for a number of months now, right at the start of my day, and it has genuinely been transformative. I've found fasting easier, I've lost fat, I'm actually eating less too, and the team at Verso tell me that is due to its blood sugar regulation effects, which lead to fewer cravings. So I'd love you to experience the same thing as me. Verso publishes third-party testing from each batch produced to guarantee you are getting what you paid for. And I'm delighted to say, to mark the launch of Outspoken, Verso is giving you an amazing offer. If you head right now to buy.ver.so/outspoken, you will save 15% on your first order. All you need to do is use the coupon code Outspoken. I'll put the links, by the way, in our YouTube and Rumble description. But to repeat, it's buy.ver.so/outspoken. Use the coupon code Outspoken. Look at it. Beautiful product. That's the clean being that I use as well. That's the cell being. It will come to you very, very fast, I'm told, by some Outspoken viewers who have already purchased the product and are using it too and say it is doing them so much good. But now, back to the show. And it's time for the uncancelled interview with Ben Habib. And Ben was actually a guest on the first ever Outspoken Live the day after the UK election when he was still deputy leader to Nigel Farage of Reform UK. Now, you'll probably know he's since lost that job, sparking outrage among his diehard followers who believe his common sense approach to wokery, multiculturalism and the economy is desperately needed in Westminster. But today, rather than playing political parlour games, this is actually an opportunity to go in depth with the successful businessman to find out how he thinks Britain can be saved. And Ben Habib, it is an absolute pleasure to have you today. But I really want to start with this breaking news, Ben, which is the video ricocheting around the internet of the new US vice presidential candidate JD Vance suggesting, half jokingly, that the UK could become the world's first Islamist nuclear power. I played it in my digest, but let's have another look.
By the way, I have to beat up on the UK just one additional thing. I was talking with a friend recently, and we were talking about, one of the big dangers in the world, of course, is nuclear proliferation, though, of course, the Biden administration doesn't care about it. And I was talking about, what is the first truly Islamist country that will get a nuclear weapon? And we were like, maybe it's Iran, maybe Pakistan already kind of counts. And then we sort of finally decided maybe it's actually the UK, since Labour just took over. But to my Tory friends, I have to say, you guys have got to get a handle on this. But
now, Ben, look, I know he was joking, right? But he has been immediately lambasted as racist and dangerous. So isn't there a really serious point here that we seem completely unable to discuss demographic change unless you're prepared to become sort of a devil-like figure in the corrupt British mainstream media?
So I think he was obviously using satire to make a point. By the way, very good to be on the show again.
Thank you, Ben. Great to have you back.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for having me. He was using satire to drive the point home. And I think it's a very serious point. And the way I take the point is that the United Kingdom, having really expunged sectarianism from its politics pretty much, even in Northern Ireland, we settled the position. There are still big debates that take place, but sectarianism had gone out of British politics, and now it's back with a vengeance. And we see it being given succor by Keir Starmer. And I will not forget Keir Starmer addressing, on Armistice Day, those who come to celebrate and mourn our military who died to protect this country, with his poppy proudly on, then going to a gathering of Muslims later that afternoon with his poppy off. And that sends a number of signals. The first is that there's a difference between those who attended the cenotaph and those who were in the Muslim gathering, a difference in their attitude to the United Kingdom and what it means to be British, because how can you be British irrespective of your religion and somehow be ashamed of the poppy? Not everyone needs to wear a poppy. You don't need to, I'm not into big virtue signaling. But the fact that Keir Starmer recognized he had to take it off sends a big signal about what's going on in our domestic politics. And we've seen that in this recent election, with 4 or 5 MPs being elected because of their view on Gaza, not because of their view on British domestic policy, which is what elections should be fought on, not on what's happening in a war over which we have close to zero influence. And of course, Gaza is not just about Gaza. It's about that soft or increasingly hard Muslim vote. It's garnering vote from the Muslim community based on the fact that it is Muslim. So sectarianism is back in the UK. And I think that's what he was basically identifying. And we need to be very careful about it, very careful.
And is there an issue just with the numbers, Ben? If you look back, the Muslim population used to be a tiny percentage of the UK. And actually, if we continue on this growth path, there could be 34 million Muslims in the UK. But by the 2050s, or does that not matter?
No, of course it matters. I mean, the way that the demography is changing matters. But here's something which is remarkable. And if you bear with me, it takes a bit of explaining, but if you bear with me. So diversity, equality, and inclusion is the government's policy ostensibly put in place to protect and promote minority rights, including principally ethnic minorities. And that's all well and good. But the way diversity, equality, and inclusion has come to be practiced is through the promotion of those ethnic minorities, religious minorities, and so on, to the detriment of the majority. And all ethnic minorities, minor religions, sexual preferences, whatever, have been lumped into this DEI bracket, and they're all promoted equally, and the majority is ignored. So DEI, those who benefit from DEI policies, are in a special place, or collectively they're in a special place in the British economic, cultural, and legislative structure. Now, when you put 4 million Muslims, 200,000 Jews, a number of gay people, a number of transgender people who are very, very small in number, all in one grouping, and you separate them, it is the largest grouping in that subset that is going to dominate. And so the Muslim vote, if you like, the Muslim category that's protected, promoted, and celebrated by DEI actually is now dominating all minority groups. And because it's protected by virtue of being in DEI, it actually has become unassailable. So even though the population of Muslims in this country, but by the way, I've got nothing against Muslims, please don't misinterpret what I'm saying. But even though the population of Muslims in this country is only 4 million, because they're in this protected category, and because they're the biggest component of that protected category, they are now having a disproportionate impact on discourse in this country and the way that this country behaves politically and culturally and in other spheres. Islam is coming to have a very dominant effect in the United Kingdom. And that's because it is the biggest majority in the minority. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes perfect sense. And look, of course, it goes without saying that we can have a conversation like this without needing to justify that we have no issue with individual Muslims. But so often, Ben, when folk do have conversations like this, the Islamophobic word is used. And I just want to raise a point that I spoke about earlier because I'm interested in your view. So when people say that I could be Islamophobic, can I respond and say, well, I'm incredibly worried about the fact that every single piece of polling that is done on this issue shows that over 50% of Muslim people in the UK are homophobic and have zero tolerance for homosexuals, which obviously I am. Can a woman say that they have huge concerns about the fact that they are pushed out of leadership positions in the Muslim world, and that there is the increasing introduction in some parts of the UK of Sharia law by the back door? Are we allowed to say that without being accused of Islamophobia?
So this is partly related to what I've just been saying, which is that DEI, diversity, equality, and inclusion, places all Muslims in this special category and makes them virtually immune, like all the other categories within DEI, immune from criticism and being challenged, because DEI exists in order to celebrate and promote their interests. And because they're the largest group, they get celebrated and promoted the most, and they become unassailable and unquestionable. And I just declare something straight away. My dad's Punjabi. My dad is a Muslim. He's a non-practicing Muslim, but he is a Muslim. I have lots of Muslim friends, but they're not the ones at issue. It's the minority extreme Muslims, if you like. And I think we need to look very carefully at what Islam is, because Islam is not one religion. It's not a settled religion right across the board. You have Sufis, you have Shias, you have Sunnis, you have Wahhabis, and you have different forms of Islam. And if you look at the Middle East itself is riven with division over Islam. Islam is not a settled, unified religion. And it is the more extremist elements in this country which are being given all the same protection as the completely moderate, perfectly reasonable human beings with whom we're accustomed to rubbing shoulders. And you're absolutely right, if I may say so, that Sharia law is being practiced. It's tolerated in this country. It is fine for Sharia law to be applied as long as it doesn't conflict with British law. But actually, only one form of law should apply in the United Kingdom, and that is British law. And we lose sight of what's important in the United Kingdom if we start giving succor to different forms of legislation, even if that's because our own legislation doesn't provide for anything specific in that regard. And just on the point of Islamophobia, and this really gets me down, it's the way language is so often used to... I've got two more points to make. The first is on how language is used to shut down debate. The word phobia means an irrational fear. So when you put Islam and phobia together, you're saying it's irrational to have a debate about Islam. Many Muslim scholars want to debate Islam. They want to debate what it is that the different tenets of Islam hold to be true, and which ones should be given more succor to, which ones should be promoted, which ones should be debated more aggressively. Muslims want to have that debate, but we're not allowed to have that debate because of the word Islamophobia, because all Muslims are put together in one category and protected under this altar of DEI. And the last thing I want to say is that we see how this plays out in the United Kingdom, because it gives people like Sadiq Khan cover to say at least 40% of the Met should be from ethnic minorities, which, if you turn it on its head, would be the equivalent of a white person saying, a white Christian person saying, 60% of the Met should be white and Christian. And if a white person were to say that, they would be cancelled. They, perhaps the only place that they would have free reign to speak would be on your channel. But Sadiq Khan can get away with saying at least 40% of the Met should be from an ethnic minority because he's got this protected status. And we are damaging the fabric of our society. The schisms in the United Kingdom are coming, in my view, because of the celebration, embedding, promotion, championing of minority ethnicities and so on, over and above to the detriment of our own culture. Sorry, there's one more thing, Dan, forgive me. There's one more thing I want to say. On the Palestinian marches, you will often see lesbians for Palestine, and you will see...
Queers for Palestine.
Queers for Palestine. And I've tried to rationalize that, because I thought to myself, these people can't be completely daft. They must know that if they were to go and live in Gaza, the first
You'd have your head chopped off and be thrown off at the top of a building.
Absolutely. Hamas would have no tolerance for you. But I think it's because they're in association through DEI that they somehow see it as acceptable to go and march, because Palestine is a minority issue. So if you're a minority lesbian and you're really not very bright, you think, well, I'll get on that bandwagon and I'll champion that minority issue. But as you rightly say, you will be given no truck. I went to speak to the Jewish community in North London a few weeks ago. And I explained to them how DEI was working against the Jewish community, and they couldn't see it. They thought the Jewish community were being protected by DEI because they're a minority religious belief, they're a minority race in the United Kingdom, and DEI protects them. but it doesn't. It only protects the biggest component within that minority definition. I'm sorry, I've labored the point, but I think it's really important to try and understand how it is.
It is incredibly important. I guess the only thing that I might disagree with you on is you talk about the extremist minority. But I guess by raising those opinion polls, I just wanted to make the point that actually it's not always an extremist minority. The majority of Muslims do not believe homosexuals should exist in the UK. The majority of Muslims do not believe that women should take on leadership roles. So that's just the one area where I sometimes question, it's not always just the extremist minority here. It's very often the overwhelming
There are some basic beliefs, pillars, which are problematic.
Exactly. And we saw that clip before the election of Angela Rayner begging for the Muslim vote in a room completely full of men. So there are lots of issues there. But look, can I ask you about this personally? Because I do wonder if you find it easier to have these discussions as a non-white man. And can you talk a little bit about how you got here? What was your political path to be able to have the bravery of these sorts of conversations, given that actually, Ben, you didn't need to, you're a very successful businessman, there was no onus on you to enter this highly controversial and divisive political arena?
So, just a bit of background on me, Dan, so it's clear for viewers. My dad's Punjabi and Pakistani. My mother is British, blonde and blue-eyed, or she was blonde before she went grey, but she was blonde, blue-eyed, and born in Isleworth. And her father fought in the Somme, and my paternal grandfather actually grew up on a farm. He had a very humble, very genuinely humble, background in Pakistan. So I am half Pakistani by ethnic origin and half British. And I'm very proud of my Pakistani background, but I am British through and through. I feel British. I think as any true British citizen would think, which is with pride about my country, pride about the contribution this country has made to the world, and so on. And what I've seen in my political journey, amongst many other things, is an antipathy, a shame by British citizens of their own past, of their own history, how it is that we came to be what we are today as a nation, a preparedness and even a desire to smother that of which we should be so protective, which is British culture, British history, British values, which, remember, we are the country that at the zenith of its power abolished the slave trade. We're the country that had the agrarian revolution started here, the industrial revolution started here. Many of the great advances in science and everything else was made in the United Kingdom because of British culture, promotion of diversity of thought, and so on. And all of that is being hijacked on the altar of the promotion of these minority interests and so on. When you promote a minority over and above and to the detriment of the majority, one, you shut down honest debate, as we've just discussed. So diversity of thought goes straight out of the window. You have to bow down to these other cultures and accept those other cultures for what they are, because that is part of celebrating them. So that's the first thing. Debate goes out of the window. The second thing that goes out of the window is economic prosperity, because you cease to recruit and promote those people who are the best at the jobs that you wish them to do, and you start doing it based on the color of their skin and whatever they might believe, etc. And we saw this with the RAF. We see it. They spent £1.7 million trying to recruit ethnic minority jet fighter pilots. They weren't interested in getting white guys. I mean, who cares what color your jet fighter pilot is? You want someone who can fly a jet, and do it the best that they can do it. And so for me, all of this is symptomatic of a country that will be eviscerated if we don't get a grip of it. It's very serious. The Tories brush it off as it's a culture war. Don't be so pathetic. Don't be so childish. It's your culture. It goes to the heart of the existence of the nation state of the United Kingdom. The definition of a nation state, a definition of a society, includes having a settled culture. And we are trashing our culture, and we're trashing it through hijacking the language, hijacking our history, promoting foreign cultures over and above into the detriment of our own culture. and so on and so forth. And so in my political journey, it's been a revelation that this is how it's taking place. And I'm very lucky because I am brown and I can say the things I've just said without, I hope, getting cancelled. And therefore I see it more as my duty, Dan, to speak up because I've got some protection. I'm afforded protection through the same DEI policy that therefore allows me to speak up. And I'm therefore obliged to speak up volubly because I have the ability to do it.
Absolutely. And look, I totally agree that the Conservative Party have allowed this to happen over the past 14 years, which is ludicrous, and it could kill their party. You know, I am pretty confident, actually, and I know a lot can change in 5 years, but I'm pretty confident that there's a strong chance of a Prime Minister Farage in 2029, because you look at the direction of travel, for example, with Le Pen in France, and the same thing has happened with the Reform UK movement here. But, and this is a big but, it's going to get so much worse, Ben, over the next 5 years under this Labour government. So what is your prescription? I mean, if you are a Brit watching this and feeling absolutely despondent, and I know so many of us are, about the direction of our country, what is the solution? How can Britain be saved?
So the only way, in my view, this is going to sound ridiculous perhaps, but the only way Britain can be saved is to return to office in power a government formed of people who have the same values as Reform UK. In other words, return Reform UK into government. If Reform UK forms a government, it'll then be able to get out of the European Court of Human Rights, abolish DEI and make sure that everyone is treated as being equal and that there's no inequality in society, no matter what colour your skin is, and so on. Be proud of the United Kingdom, teach our history accurately and in context. Yeah, sure, we did some stuff in the past we're not proud of, but actually, on the whole, we were the best power, the best empire that ever existed on the face of the earth and spread huge amounts of prosperity. Do all these things. If reform comes to power, our principal, I think, effort will be in repealing loads and loads of laws and regulations that have been made to dumb down that which is the United Kingdom. So it'll be a matter of repealing. Most governments don't repeal. They just pass more and more laws. They try and patch up a bad law by passing another law. And, you get law upon law upon law, and you just, make everything worse. We just repeal, repeal, repeal. And I often say to people, if you want a legislative agenda, if you can't think of what a legislative agenda you should have, and you want one, look at everything Tony Blair did and repeal it. You might make a few mistakes, but on the whole, your country will end up basically in a good place.
Absolutely fascinating. I think, Ben, a lot of people will be happy with your answer there, because I think one thing that I've really picked up in all of the outrage over you losing the job as Reform UK deputy leader is that folk are worried about a divided Reform UK movement. They feel like they still want you in the tent. And one of the problems in the past, of course, has been so many splits on the right. So you're still talking about Reform UK as a collective. You're still saying you're part of it. You're still saying we. So that gives people some hope that actually there is a way forward for you in the party, potentially.
Look, I mean, I never left the party, and without wishing to bang my own drum, it was Richard Tyson, me, that spearheaded the effort to get the party from 6% in the polls, which is where it was when I joined, to 16% before the general election.
You did a brilliant job.
Yeah, we did a really good job, actually. And I'm going to go on fighting for that cause. My only criticism, and it's a constructive criticism, and one that I have made publicly, but it's something that I felt was necessary, was that Reform UK needs to democratise. You can't form a government in 2029 with a political party controlled by one individual. As much as I love Nigel, you just simply can't do it. How can you have a government owned by one guy? It doesn't make any sense, right? So we've got to democratise. We've got to get on with it now. We've got to get those structures in place now. It'll take years to bed down those new structures, to get a genuinely grown-up political party fit to govern. So we've got to get on with it full speed. And that's the only pressure I'm bringing on Reform UK, is to democratize and get on with it. I don't care. And I swear I mean this. I've said this, repeat. I never wanted to be deputy leader. When Richard asked me to be deputy leader, I took 3 or 4 weeks over making my decision. And I'm very happy to be the bog cleaner, as long as I get an opportunity to champion the values and the policies of Reform UK. And as long as those policies and values stay, with what I believe in, and I can't see how they're going to change. So I'm a big proponent of Reform UK. I'm also very pleased, slight digression, Dan, but today Jim Allister, who is leader of the TUV and was returned to Parliament as well alongside Reform UK MPs, has agreed to take Reform UK's whip in all matters associated with the alliance that we have with Reform UK. And I am utterly delighted by that. It sends a number of signals to me. The first is that Nigel and the leadership still believe in the alliance with the TUV, which means that we will be fighting for the union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And we cannot be a country if we don't fight for a significant territorial part of our country. I know that sounds absurd to have to say it, but that is true. So we're going to make the fight for the union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland in the Commons. And the second thing that makes me really pleased about that is that we will be the biggest voice for unionism in the Commons, bigger than the Democratic Unionist Party of Northern Ireland. And the Democratic Unionist Party of Northern Ireland, who are a bit like the Tories, they talk all the right things but do all the wrong things, if you don't mind me saying so, they will have to now man up and be proper unionists. So instead of all the accusations being made before the election that, oh, you're going to split the unionist vote in Northern Ireland if TUV stand, actually we're going to emerge from that election with a much, much stronger voice for the union in Parliament. And that is critical. What are we if we are not the union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland? That is the United Kingdom.
But I think a lot of people will pick up on your words where you've said you still love Nigel. So that's positive. Of course.
Give him a kiss and a cuddle if he walks into the room.
Okay, now look, Ben Habib, stand by, because right now we're going to move over to the uncancelled after show to continue the second half of our conversation. If you don't know about the after show, it's very important to me that we have a safe space where we're not patrolled by big tech, because of course on big tech, censorship and control runs deep. So we have www.outspoken.live, a website with a membership section where you will get half an hour of extra content every single day. So what we do at this point is we move off YouTube, we move off Rumble, we move onto our own platform. And the very exciting thing is that Ben Habib is going to be there with us for the whole show to answer your questions today. Not my questions, but your brilliant questions. And you are super smart, so I can't wait to see what you want to ask him. So all you have to do is head right now to the website www.outspoken.live, register, sign up, and I'll see you on the after show. But remember, we are back here live every weekday at 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, and most importantly, I promise to keep fighting for you. See you on the after show.